Good morning, my name is Rachel. If you're new to my channel, then welcome. I'm glad that you're here. I am just sharing my journey with the carnivore diet to heal from years of severe chronic illness. I've definitely made progress so far and it has been well worth it, but I do want to be honest in sharing that I have a long ways to come until I'm healthy. Something that I've noticed in the carnivore community, a lot of times people will say, oh, just do the carnivore diet for 30 days and you'll be healed of absolutely anything. And that just really is often not the case, especially for people with severe and complex health issues that have been going on for many years. And if you think about it, years and years of damage to your body is not just going to heal overnight. It's going to take time. And so I just wanted to make a video to share with you guys some of the things that I've experimented with so far for kind of troubleshooting on the carnivore diet, and also some things that I have been looking into and am planning to experiment with and implement soon. Before we get into it, I just want to note that I'm not giving medical advice or specific diet advice to you. This is just my experience, things that I've researched and learned about. So I always just like to encourage you guys to do your own research and always do what feels best for you. So as simple as the carnivore diet is, there are actually so many different ways to approach it and so many different factors that you can tweak and lifestyle changes that you can implement that can potentially make a big difference. As I've researched, it has sometimes been overwhelming with how many things that I want to try and experiment with, but you can only do so much at once. I'm just doing my best to pace myself and remember that I can't change everything at once. I can't do all the experiments at once, no matter how much I really want to. And people in the carnivore community are all going to have different ideas and different opinions on all of these topics. Just do what makes you feel good and do what you feel best about, because not everybody's the same. We're all different. So this is going to be a list of things that I've either experimented with myself or that I have been researching and am hoping to implement in the future. The first one is electrolytes. That's something that's pretty easily adjusted. I use Redmond's Relight unflavored electrolytes. I think the electrolyte panel and ratios in that mix is really good, and there are no added fillers or anything like that, so it's perfectly good for super strict carnivore diets. So I'll put a link to that down below, and anything else that I mentioned in the video I'll put a link to just in case you guys want to take a look. I also use the Keto Chow unflavored electrolyte drops. Those two are my favorite kinds of electrolytes and ones that I like to use a lot. But basically, I think it really just depends on the person how much electrolytes you should have. There are people that do the carnivore diet that do their best without any electrolytes at all, and then there are people that need to have huge amounts of electrolytes to be able to function and feel good. So it really just depends, and it's something that you have to experiment with to figure out what is best for you. Okay, the second one is fat levels. So this is something that I would probably ease into if you're transitioning to carnivore. I think the higher levels of fat is something that takes the body a while to adjust to, especially if you're like me and you don't have a gallbladder, then your body may have trouble digesting fats. I think a lot of people with serious chronic health issues often will find more healing with really high levels of fat intake. I think it's something that really should be implemented gradually and not upped really quickly, just because it could potentially lead to unpleasant symptoms, something even 6 months in that I'm still trying to experiment with and see what's best for me. My body still struggles to digest fats. I think it's because I don't have a gallbladder and because I've dealt with gastroparesis and intestinal dysmotility. So it has improved since the beginning of carnivore when I first started, but I am still not properly digesting my foods, and I think that's because my gut has still not healed, which is a whole nother topic. But ox bile is something that a lot of people will recommend taking if you have trouble digesting fats. It's something that I have just recently started trying, so I can't really say for sure if it is helping me or not, but I'll be sure to update you guys on that when I get to that point. Next one is histamines. So one of those topics that you could easily do a whole entire series of videos on and there's so many different aspects to histamine intolerance, but histamine intolerance is something that sometimes improves for people when they go on carnivore, but it's also something that can sometimes temporarily get worse. If you recognize that you feel worse after you reheat up leftovers from the fridge, or if you slow cook something versus quickly cook it in the air fryer or the oven, and histamine intolerance might be a possibility. I think histamine intolerance is a sign that your body hasn't healed and that your gut hasn't healed, and it's something that I think is very possible to completely heal and recover from, but it's something that takes time, and there are a lot of different approaches as to how to best deal with histamine intolerance. I definitely plan to make lots more videos about histamine intolerance, but some basic tips to try to implement are, if you think you're dealing with it, are always freeze your leftovers right away and reheat them from frozen. I like to do it in my air fryer. Try to lower cooking times as much as possible. Doing things like really long, slow cooks will increase the histamine content a lot. One of the biggest things for people is buying unaged meat. So when you buy meat from the grocery store, it's always going to be aged, especially beef. It's typically aged for at least 30 days, and so a lot of people that are really sensitive will react to store-bought meat. I would say you can pretty safely assume any beef is aged unless you specifically ask a farm and they tell you that it isn't aged or hung at all. There are only 3 places that I have found that do not age their beef, and those are Billy Doe Meats, North Star Bison, and White Oak Pastures. Those 3 are where I have been getting all of my meats from, and everything they have is unaged unless otherwise noted on their website. So that's something to look into. It is definitely more expensive to buy unaged meat, but I'm considering it an investment in my health. Lately I've been doing a lot of research on histamine intolerance because it's something that I really am determined to heal and get over, so that I can get back to slow cooking all my meats and smoking all my meats, because that's something that I really love and enjoy, and I think it's completely possible to heal from it, but it may just take a little bit of time. Anyways, moving on. The next one is omega-6 to omega-3 ratios. So the basis of this is when livestock is conventionally raised, like beef is fed grain, or animals aren't fed properly, then often the omega-6 to 3 ratio will be very affected and become much higher than what it technically should be. The meat that you buy in the store is going to be conventionally raised and not fed its proper diet, and so people that are really sensitive can react poorly to those meats and can have more trouble healing if that omega-6 to 3 ratio is really high, especially with pork and chicken that are not pasture raised. Those ratios are going to be really high and can potentially be very inflammatory. There's a lot of debate as to whether the difference between grain finished and grass finished beef is significant to health, and a lot of carnivore proponents will say that it isn't, but I think that in really sensitive people it could potentially make a difference to do 100% grass finished. I have talked to several people that it has made a big difference for us, so it's just something to consider. I completely agree that many and most people can heal on eating conventional meat just from the grocery store. It's much more affordable, but I think in people that are still really struggling in more severe health situations, it may be something to really take into consideration. That's one of the reasons why I did the Lion diet, because pork and chicken are pretty high in the omega-6 to 3 ratios, but I have not been eating 100% grass finished beef and lamb, and so this is something that I'm planning to do an experiment with soon, and I'll be sure to share more about that with you guys. But it's just something that if you're still really struggling, it may be a good thing to consider, if that makes sense. Alright, the 5th one is fasting. So this is something that I don't think people should get started with right away. I think you should definitely get over the transition phase before starting this unless you really feel like you're ready. But it's something to be careful with if you have a history of being underweight or having eating disorders. It's just something to approach very carefully and something that you'll want to do a lot of research on before implementing. And it's something that I really couldn't get into in the beginning because I was underweight and just really struggling to get enough calories, and it just wasn't an option for me at that point. Over the last few months I've started with intermittent fasting, and so I have been doing, I started with like an 8-hour eating window, and then I cut that down as time went on, and now I'm at about 4 or 5 hour eating window. So I typically do around 11 to 4, but it can vary depending on the day and how hungry I'm feeling. But fasting can be a very powerful, I think sometimes the biggest benefits that can come out of fasting are in longer fasts, but if not done properly, then that can be dangerous. So just be very cautious if you do start fasting. This is something that I'm wanting to experiment with, and I have done 1 or 2 24-hour fasts, and those have gone okay, but I really want to try to work my way up to the 48 or 72-hour fasts, or even longer if possible. But I know I just have to be careful because I'm still borderline underweight and still have a lot of symptoms like dizziness and that sort of thing. So I think keeping your electrolytes up is important during that time, but even then not everybody is ready to fast, and that's okay. So like I always say, just do what makes you feel best, and experiment safely, of course. So I think I'm gonna continue to try to slowly up the length of my longer fasts, and maybe try one every week or 2 until I can get to the longer fasts. Another type of fasting that I'm interested in doing is like a meat stock or bone broth fast, and I've heard some really great things about gut healing for that as well. So many things, guys, so many things I want to try. I'm not even halfway through this list. All right, the 6th one is vitamin D. So I think it's always best when it comes to supplementation to get things naturally. So if you can be out in the sun, then that's going to be best. But if that's not really an option for you because of where you live or your work schedule, then a really good option might be cod liver oil. That's something that I just started taking this week, so I'm not completely sure how much it's benefiting me, but I've heard really good things about it. And the best and cleanest brand that I could find is called Rosetta's, so I'll link that below. It doesn't taste great, but it's really not that bad. Just have something good to eat afterwards. Okay, the 7th one is organs. So I know this is a really heated topic in the carnivore community, which I think is kind of funny because it's just like, I don't know, like some people, it's obvious that some people do great without organs, and it's obvious that some people do great with organs, but I think it's something to definitely consider experimenting with, especially if you're really sick. Organs are very nutrient dense and may have a lot of potential to accelerate your healing. It's something that I have definitely been upping a lot in the last few months. So I've been eating heart, brain, kidney. I just got some thymus that I haven't tried yet. Something to be careful with organs is if you're really sensitive to reactions, just go slow. Like just have a couple, like a bite or 2 when you first start, and then work your way up if you don't have any kind of negative reaction to. Organs are really powerful and so nutrient dense that they can actually cause die-off reactions in the beginning when you start taking them, so it's always best to just start small. Organs, I would say, don't taste the best. I have found that goat and lamb organs are much more mild than beef organs, and they're smaller, so they're kind of closer to portion sizes than, you know, like a beef heart that's like this big. And so I've kind of enjoyed eating those lately, and it's something that I'm slowly growing to like a little bit, but I'd say like the kidney still tastes terrible. I don't like the taste of liver. Heart is the best tasting organ in my opinion, and so if you're looking for something mild, I would definitely start with that. Some people love that taste of organs. It's something that I haven't grown to quite love yet, but I really do want my body to get the nutrients, so I'm just eating it anyway and telling myself that I like the taste until I actually do start liking it. I really do like the idea of, you know, honoring the animal and using as many parts of it as possible versus the idea of just like discarding the organ meats and not using them. So that's another reason why. So that's just another good thing to experiment with if you're not seeing results as quickly as you would like to. Number 8, are you eating enough? So that's something that I really struggled with in the beginning, and I think that's one of the reasons why my transition was pretty difficult. It takes a while for the body to adjust to this very different style of eating, and so some people may feel full very early on in the beginning and not feel hungry. It's just something to consider, like say for a week, just eating a half a pound more every day and seeing if that makes a difference in how you feel. I know a lot of people say they do feel better if they eat more, but I don't know, you might feel better if you eat less too. So just experiment and see what works best for you. Okay, number 9 is die-off reactions or Herxheimer reactions, which is basically when your body is shedding toxins and your immune system is waking up again and you're starting to heal, but that temporarily worsens your symptoms before they start to improve. These are things that definitely deserve videos of their own, but I think it's really difficult to tell the difference between die-off reactions and oxalate dumping and also histamine reactions. They're all kind of intertwined and it's tough to tell what is what. But I don't really think it's super important that you can identify what symptoms are coming from what. I think it's all part of the healing process. If you haven't started the carnivore diet yet, then you may want to consider transitioning very slowly into the carnivore diet so that your body can adjust as you slowly cut down the level of plants that you're eating, because it's a very dramatic change for the gut, and I don't think it's necessarily a good thing to go cold turkey and have your gut just be completely shocked like that. Some people do great with it, but some people that can really inhibit their healing and prolong their healing if they go too quickly into this way of eating. The first week after I started carnivore, I got really bad thrush in my throat, and that was from the die-off of candida. And I remember thinking, like, how is it possible that I have thrush? Like, I'm not having any carbs, and candida feeds off of carbs and sugar, and yet I have this like really bad thrush. How does that make sense? But it was because I wasn't feeding the candida that I was having all this die-off, which in turn caused those symptoms. So, and another thing that happened to me was after the first couple weeks of carnivore, I started getting these like red bumps all over my legs and my arms, and that was definitely a sign of oxalate dumping. I still have like little clear crystals like coming out of the skin on my legs and arms, and that, from what I have researched and learned about, is oxalate dumping and little oxalate crystals coming out from like actually being poisoned by eating too many plants. So it's not something that happens to everyone or even most people, but it's just something to keep in mind if you have some weird symptoms come up. Okay, the 10th one is how you cook your meats. Something that I have noticed is that people who have really severe gut damage often don't do well with meats that are crisped and may tend to do better with boiled meats and soups. Something that I have noticed, like if I boil my meat or pressure cook my meats, then I tend to handle it better than if I crisp it in a skillet or crisp it in the air fryer, which I love doing. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you know that I love crisping my meat. I just think it makes it taste so good, but it may be inhibiting healing. And so this is another experiment that I want to do, of doing like a week of only eating boiled meats to see how that makes a difference. This is something that is a principle of the GAPS diet, which is similar to carnivore in that it's like meat-based and healthy animal fat-based, but it's not completely carnivore. And I think it's a very powerful diet and method for healing that I've just recently been learning more about. There's a book called Gut and Physiology Syndrome, and the whole healing protocol was developed by a doctor. She's brilliant. Like, I really enjoyed her book, and I would recommend reading it just because I feel like it gave me a lot of ideas as to how I could potentially accelerate my healing. Anyways, I think trying boiled meats or pressure cooked meats and drinking that liquid from the boiled meat as meat stock can be a really healing thing for the gut. I'll keep you guys posted on that experiment. We'll see when I get to it because I have a lot of things that I want to try. Number 11. So meat stock and bone broth. So there's a difference between meat stock and bone broth. Meat stock is boiled for just a few hours and is typically made with cuts of meat that are on the bone. So you'll boil the meat and maybe put things like chicken feet in it and neck bones, things that will make your really gelatinous stock. That's a big principle of the GAPS diet. Something interesting that they mention is that people who are very sensitive and have very damaged guts often don't do well with traditional slow-cooked bone broth, which is often cooked for up to 1 to 2 full days, which, as you know, would be really high in histamines too. So meat stock is a really good lower histamine alternative and something that is gentler but still gives all of the great nutrients that can help with healing the gut. There are some people that are still really sensitive to meat stock, in which case some people start with literally just boiling the meat stock for 30 minutes and even starting with like a few drops or a teaspoon until you can handle and tolerate more. I personally think that the meat stock may be an essential step for a lot of people that are having trouble with healing, and something that I've implemented over the last few months, but I want to continue to up it and potentially do a longer meat stock fast whenever I'm up for that. So yeah, I think that's something that's really good to experiment with. If you're sensitive to histamines, then definitely freeze the broth either in mason jars or bags once it cools down enough, and that will limit the histamine intake. Alright, number 12 is cold therapy and Wim Hof breathing. I think Wim Hof is awesome. I have been doing his breathing exercises for a while. I was doing it every day, but I've kind of fallen off on that and want to get back on with it. But I do always try to make sure the end of my shower is cold, and I really like the way that makes me feel. I haven't progressed to the point of doing like the cold plunging baths, but I really do want to get there because I think cold therapy can be really powerful and very beneficial for healing and help with energy levels and pain. So yeah, I think Wim Hof is a good thing to look into, but with anything, be careful and go slow with it. Do your research before jumping in. Yeah. Okay, the 13th one is looking at toxins in different products that you use, cookware, skin products, all those things. In the GAPS diet book that I read, she really recommended for people that have serious gut issues to limit the toxins around them as much as possible. Of course, we live in a world full of toxins, but when you're really sick, your body has a toxic overload and has a lot of trouble processing those toxins normally. So I think for some people it can be really helpful to minimize the toxins, to cook with things like cast iron or glass pans so that you're not getting the toxins from non-stick. I mean, you can go really far with this. I think it can be an overwhelming thing for a lot of people, just because when you start learning about it and reading about it, it feels like, oh my gosh, I have to change everything. I have to learn how to do all these different types of cleaning and cooking and self-care. I'm just trying to very slowly implement non-toxic practices and just do it at my own pace, because I know it's something that I can't change everything about the way I'm cooking overnight. Like, for example, in one of my last videos, I used aluminum foil with the brisket I made, and I got several comments like, don't use aluminum foil, it's toxic. So that's something that I've taken out. I've just been trying to keep an open mind with that and learn about it, but also not trying to like stress myself out over being perfect about all of it, because that's just probably going to do more harm than good if you stress out over it. I have a ways to come, but I have changed a lot of things. So alright, the last one is probably my favorite lately, and it's something that I've been doing a lot of research on and been feeling really excited about, and that is the mental aspects of healing. I think this might be a really big missing link for a lot of people who are not seeing the progress that they'd like to see with healing. And basically the idea with it is, when you have serious chronic illness, your body is stuck in like a constant state of fight or flight. So that puts a lot of stress on your organs and in turn creates a lot of physical symptoms and makes it very difficult for the body to heal, because the body needs to be in a parasympathetic state to heal, and when we're stuck in that constant fight or flight state, healing is going to be almost impossible to achieve. I've been researching neuroplasticity and the idea that we can retrain our brain to make sure that it knows that it's safe. This is something that I think is really big for healing histamine intolerance, because our bodies produce histamines on its own, and so when we're nervous and anxious about having a reaction, then that reaction to the food is only going to be stronger. And it's only natural to be nervous because the reactions can be severe, they can be scary, but I think it's something that really can be addressed. I looked into certain programs like DNRS and the GUPTA program, which are basically made for people with chronic illness. At first when I heard about them, I thought they sounded kind of crazy, but as I have researched them more and really looked into the idea of neuroplasticity and the amazing capability of the brain and the body to heal, I think it could be a really important tool for people in their healing journeys. It's not something that I can personally recommend because I haven't done it yet, but I'm planning to start DNRS in maybe the next month or so, and we'll be sure to keep you guys updated on how that goes. I'll put a link to the DNRS website down below, just if you guys want to learn more about it. They have a lot of information on there. I think it could be a really powerful thing, and I'm excited about trying it. I've been reading books about rewiring the brain. I've been doing visualizations. I think even things like spending time outside can be really good for our mental state and healing, and even just believing that you're going to heal and not feeding negative thought patterns. So anyways, those are some things that I have done a lot of research on and have been excited about, and I just wanted to share with you guys in case it might be helpful. If anyone has any other tips to add below or just experiences with any of these things, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. I know this video is longer than usual, but I could probably have talked for hours about all these things because it's just something that I'm excited about. I'm excited about healing, I'm hopeful for healing, and I'll be sure to keep you guys updated on any of these experiments that I do. Be sure to subscribe and follow along on Instagram, and I will look forward to seeing you guys next time.